have Dr. Williams, Edet Okon, who is a medical practitioner with the International Certification in Leadership in Healthcare, and of course, a frontline in the isolation center with the whole COVID-19 that is happening. Welcome, Dr. Williams.
Hello, good morning.
Have you here. Good morning. You're looking very doctorate.
Oh, really?
Do doctors always have to wear white shirts?
Nope.
I've never seen a doctor wear blue shirts.
You have, I'm sure. You just don't remember.
No, I've seen.
I haven't seen,
okay.
but good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Let's talk about vaccines on its own, first
Okay.
of all. Now, we've seen, we hear, now you're a doctor in practice, and we're talking about vaccines. How long exactly should it take for the certification that a vaccine is good? Now, it has nothing to do with the COVID-19. We're talking about vaccines.
Okay, generally.
Now, generally, vaccines.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning.
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 Nice to have you here with me, or nice to have myself here with you, since it's your show. Okay, so standard, about 8 to 10 years.
Standard 8 to 10 years for.
Standard 8 to 10 years.
And what are the processes
Okay,
that happen between
and
them?
there are about 5 phases. We have preclinical trials first, and then clinical trial phase 1, and clinical trial phase 1. Preclinical trials basically have to do with testings on lab rats,
people.
animals, not people. Just
They don't use people at all.
no, not
At
for
the phase
preclinical.
1.
For preclinical.
Okay.
Therefore, phase 1, you try to find the right dose that you could actually start with in humans, and they give micro doses to just see for safety. It's majorly about safety and efficacious doses.
Okay.
So they start with small ones and titrate upwards, and then until they find one that can fly and have some therapeutic effect. And then you have the phase 2 trials, which are also a bigger deal on the safety and effectiveness. And then phase 3 is a much larger one. You have up to about 40,000 participants. A lot of times they're randomized. Sometimes they're double-blinded. They're in different places. You have different centers, and you have them in about tens of thousands. Take those things and you observe. A lot of times not a lot of times, basically this takes a very long time because of all the things that could possibly go wrong, to give an objective view of all the things. And then each of them has criteria for which you have to now move to the next stage.
Okay.
For what we've seen in the COVID vaccine situation, we've found that a lot of them were done parallel to each other. So they were doing phase 1, at the same time they were doing phase 2 somewhere else, and at the same time they were doing phase 3. Much as that can seem to be, called for in the circumstance, saying they want to rush it, I think if you need to make money before you start a business, you have to have the money before you start the business. And then you need to make profit before you expand. You have to actually have the profits before you expand. You cannot be trying to make money, be starting the business at the same time, and be expanding the business at the exact same time. Something's going to go wrong, okay? And in the scientific process, that gives you a lot of disposition to prejudices, because if you've already started your phase 3 trials, you really want it to just go through. You may overlook a lot of things, because you're supposed to not be able to start phase 2 until phase 1 is complete and says go ahead.
Okay.
But now, without the go ahead, you've gone to the phase 2 already, saying you're doing it simultaneously. Don't worry, the results of phase 1 come bad, we'll stop phase 2 at the same time. We're human beings, we know how we want success.
Yeah.
It's expected that at some point you may compromise. And that's the reason why these things were done serially instead of being parallel, because it defeats some kind of integrity of the process when you do it that way. And true, when you say the end justifies the means, true to that. We've seen a lot of uncomfortable adverse effects.
Right.
Right.
So I wanted to talk
we've-
about that later.
We've seen a lot of uncomfortable adverse effects, especially with the Johnson & Johnson, which had to be entirely taken off the market by the company.
Okay.
Of course, the US first of all sanctioned them, and then SA stopped it, and then the company itself had to stop all proceedings in Europe, and then the EU also stopped it. So they basically just stopped themselves from going on with that, and that was because they had a rare blood clot challenge, cerebral venous sinus thrombosis. And it was a weird one because you also had reduced platelets, low platelets. Funny enough, that might just make no sense to you, but that doesn't make any sense medically for you to have low platelets and also have that at the same time. So it was a unique kind. So you couldn't really miss it and say it might have been from something else. It was a unique type of blood clots that were being formed. And that's what should happen in phase 2. In phase 2 trials that were done rightly, you should have identified those things. You see, so when somebody is trying to convince me that, okay, we did it in parallel, but we did it rightly, I'm saying 3 months into your rollout, you're having to pull back not one, at least 2. AstraZeneca also had the same problems.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think Pfizer also had some challenges at some point.
Yes.
And these are, a lot of them are also having the exact same kind of blood clots. So this is something that is peculiar to these vaccines. So it's something that if you had done proper scientific process, you should have found it, because it seems to be more than a coincidence. Having more than one type of vaccine have the same kinds of severe adverse effects. And people have actually died from this.
Yeah, because, sorry to cut you short. You guys know about DMX, right?
Of course.
The rapper / Christian that, you know, the first story that came out was that he died of overdose. And later the family had to do a press conference to come out and say, no, he took a vaccine, he took the vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine a week ago. And after that, he was not the same. And then that's how he died.
Okay.
So based on that kind of story.
Yeah, based on that kind of story, well, classically, you would need to do a post-mortem
To actually
find out what was the exact cause of death. But then, non-classically, and in the generic term, going from how we started out with COVID deaths and defining COVID deaths initially, we had a very loose definition. I had challenges with that definition. Ab initio, they started out from any death that happened 60 days from a positive COVID result was attributed to COVID, and we knew that, you know, there are a lot of other
that was a lot of
comorbidities. That's very loose. It lets a lot of numbers come in there. After a while, the WHO edited that to 28 days, right? Okay. Which was less outrageous than the first one, but I think it's still a bit loose. Well, we have about the same thing now for, if we use that same title for vaccine adverse reactions, I think any adverse reaction major that's within 2 weeks to a month is worthy to be attributed to the vaccine. Yeah, I mean on a broad statement. So on that note, you could actually postulate that
it was the vaccine.
You know, I like what you did say. So that means it is you've given us the scientific processes of how vaccines should be produced. Now, when the COVID-19 fiasco happened, and in a rush, you know, to say, okay, look, the vaccines were made, and now the vaccines they said was going to give people immunity from the virus. Now, how long does it take for you to get immunized? Because we see they tell you need to take the first jab, the second jab of the vaccines. Now there's even the third jab of the vaccines. And there's even, I'm hearing some things about the fourth jab of the vaccines. How many vaccines do you need to take before you get immunized? Completely.
I think the question I want to ask, which is related to yours, is how do vaccines work? I thought that because when my child took vaccines, it meant that the virus or whatever we're taking the vaccine for should not be able to penetrate or come into the body anymore, isn't it? Okay. So how come people still take this vaccine that they tell you you can still get infected, you still have to social distance, you still have to wear your mask?
Okay, I'll come to that. I have a thing or two to say about that. First of all, your question, how do vaccines work on a general? The idea of vaccination is pretty simple, right? It's giving your body a heads up so that you can be better prepared when it does happen naturally. Okay. All right, so a vaccine basically introduces into your body either a weakened live virus or pathogen, we call that live attenuated vaccines, or actual just dead pathogens or parts of them, maybe their proteins or their spikes or their cell membranes, something that the body can recognize and can act upon if it sees it a second time. So that comes in, that sensitizes the body, the T cells remember it, and they say, hey, we know you, we'll see you some other time. And then if the person gets infected naturally, then the body doesn't take as long as it would to respond, so it responds faster. That's the beautiful idea of vaccinations generally. Okay, so Do we have other vaccines where you have to take repeated shots? Yes, we do. A classic example, if you guys are ladies, if you've ever given birth, you've taken tetanus
Yes.
shots at different times, and then you have to take a number of them before you get. So it's different for different diseases, all right? So for the COVID specifically, we started out saying 2 jabs, full vaccination. That was the first thing. But, and that's basically it for, I think, all of them for right now. But then Moderna's CEO and the Pfizer CEO came up and said, you know what, the thing is, we don't really know for how long you are protected after taking the COVID vaccine. Nobody.
Sorry, I just want to highlight that you do not really know how long you're protected when you take the COVID-19 vaccines.
Up until, I think, April 19th, the WHO's website still says the same thing about Pfizer, Moderna. We don't know how long it protects for. And so because of that, they're postulating that, specifically Pfizer is postulating that in 6 months from the full vaccination, that's from the second jab, you need to probably take a booster, right? And then he also said that you might actually need a booster every year going forward. So that's quite frequent. I'm not quite sure there's anyone who take every year endlessly, aside from, I think, maybe the flu vaccine, the H1N1, on some cases. So that's how that goes with the, nobody really knows how long you're protected for. And about the other practices you still need to keep up with after taking the vaccines, that one is a bit, to
It's
me,
off.
Very off.
it's a bit off.
Okay, yes, because one thing, like I said, a little bit off. Another thing that is off, that is worrisome, is the fact that they have to enforce it.
Enforce what?
The
Vaccine.
vaccinations.
Taking the vaccine.
Taking the vaccines,
Okay,
because we see some areas where some persons want to like enforce it and ensure that people.
I don't think we right now have any police enforced vaccinations or executively enforced vaccinations. What we do have, and I do still have a challenge with, are how do I call this? Socially enforced vaccinations.
Yes.
So
Yeah, before we get
I-
to socially enforced
Yeah.
vaccinations, you know, you said something that was really crucial. The fact that there is no time, you know, that is given to this full recovery of the COVID-19 virus, because now it first of all started when you needed 2 jabs of the vaccine. Now you need a booster every single year. So you're never ever going to get totally free
Because they don't
from the
know.
virus, because they don't know. And we saw people who actually got healed of the virus naturally. We saw the emergence when the COVID-19 fiasco started of chloroquine working for the vaccine. We saw people like Dr. Stella Emanuel and several other virologists, physicians coming up to say, look, once you take this, it actually gives you complete. But they shut that particular part down. Now, you did talk about the fact that enforcement of social pressure when it comes to taking the vaccines.
Yeah. That's happened in some quarters. I had a friend in the UAE who couldn't keep a job because, you know, he had to get vaccinated first with the Sinovac. So those things should be frowned upon, okay? Reasons are very simple and very basic. Nobody takes responsibility for possible adverse reactions from these vaccines. All right? They are currently licensed under experimental drugs. So they're basically largely experimental to a large extent, right? So you should not insistently implore me to take an experimental thing. All right? It should be free will. You have the free will to say, I want to take it. So actually, in the making of even novel drugs, before they are entirely, somebody has to do phase 1 trials, right?
Right.
It's a human being that does that. So you have the right to say, I want to use my body to play, you know, golf. But nobody should insist that you use your body to play golf. Socially,
Now,
politically. So those incidences where you have an employer saying, in my organization, I want to employ only vaccinated, those should be frowned upon, those should be hit hard, you know, or you say you can't access this service, maybe a flight without being vaccinated. It's not right because we don't even know how long it protects for. So you're putting too much emphasis on something that you cannot even vouch for.
True.
Right? You can't vouch as much for it it's something that we are looking out for, like, okay, maybe it's going to be good. You can't tell me how long it's going to work for. And if you can't tell me how long it's going to work for, or if it's going to work for the next 6 months to a year, then I really don't think you know the implications of the adverse effects in the next 1 year. That's fair game to say. And if I'm not interested in going through that loop with you, you should let me be. All right, you should let me be, especially for a virus that has a very high recovery rate. And there was this company, MERCK, Merck. They stopped production of, or they stopped attempts at production of 2 of their vaccines and then switched to therapeutics, which is something that I'm really up for, you know. And the reason why they did that was that they found out that for their own vaccines, the natural immunity actually superseded that which the vaccines was given. And it makes a lot of sense because you really are not going to do better than the actual natural virus. It comes in, it does what it does. And they switched to making drugs. I think we should have a lot more emphasis on therapeutics, because that makes a lot more sense for a virus that has this kind of recovery rate and the possibility of this kind of adverse effects from the vaccines. Everybody has to take a vaccine for it to work and give you that herd immunity, right? That's what you're looking for. And that exposes more people to the possibility of adverse effects. But for therapeutics, you only give to people that are sick.
Okay.
Right? So if I'm not sick, you don't give me, I'm not exposed to that adverse effect, if there even is. And then if I do get an adverse effect, at least I was really sick and I really needed it, so it was worth my try. So I think that's something that we should...
So we should try more
we should
the
try
therapeutic
more
measures.
therapeutics
there are,
than-
First
there are,
vaccinations.
there are
And
actually
vaccinations.
therapeutics. I remember when the COVID-19 pandemic first came out, we had a doctor from Edo State University that had, he had the combination of different conjunctions that he was able to scientifically prove. But nobody,
Remember Madagascar too?
nobody encouraged
Yes.
him.